I'm Martin Evans, and I'm president of the Camera Club of Richmond, for those of you who don't know me. And Happy New Year to everyone. Um, yeah, we have a lot of information to share with you this evening, and we've done it a little differently on the PowerPoint. Just remember that the PowerPoint will be posted online, and a lot of the same information is in the southern exposure and so forth. But there's a lot of information that is going to be talked about this evening as a forecast for the coming year. For those of you who did not attend the banquet, it was a nice event. We had a good time. For those of you who did and wanted to promote a different atmosphere, or if you liked it, tell us. And if you didn't like it and had some suggestions, we'd be happy to hear from you. But it went off well, and I think most folks had a pretty good time. The images that were presented and the winners are, if not already there, they are in the Southern Exposure and the website and other venues that you can see. I'm sorry? Not, but coming. These are new members, and we have some guests tonight. Cheryl Cross in the back, and Debbie Fisk and her husband. Welcome. Yep. But if you know somebody here, make them welcome, and we're happy to have everyone. There are obviously some folks online that either don't like driving at night or infirmed or whatever, but we're happy to have all of you. The retiring members of the board are listed here. The new members are listed at the bottom, the new board members. And I think everybody knows who they are. I have one more award that we did not give out at the award ceremony. And it's a very deserving award. It represents a multi-year commitment to the club. The person is print director from 2017 to 2020, multimedia director from 2020 to 24, and it really is a tribute to him to keep the club going through COVID and all of that. And we're happy to present to Leo. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
You deserve a lot of credit for. Leadership team is listed. You've seen these folks before. And the reminder to pay your dues. This is a QR code, and if you want to take a photograph of that, it'll be in all the places we mentioned. But it's gone up $5 in inflationary terms, like everything else. The monthly meetings. Next meeting is with Rumley on February 11th, and that's always fun, and he's always very interesting in his critiques. Sign up for meetups. Here's another one of the QR codes. Joe Ring has the event in the train show at the Raceway. Any comment, Joe? Be neat. Anyway, there are a lot of activities coming up and so forth. Marianne Barnhart with education. Here's her link to the QR code there as well. As you can see, the intentional camera movement, the Pro Lab tour, and uh, the event with Fred about post processing is coming up as well. Here's the link to the Facebook group. Um, and the winners, is that active yet? You said it's coming. That's already there? Okay. Okay, great. And Karen, any comment you want to make about what's up here? I should add, if regarding the um, end of year scores, if you want to see your personal score, not everyone's score, but your personal score, um, contact Keary, webmaster, and you can get your scores and so forth. Pat could not be here this evening. The thing to mention here is that um, we're putting the deadlines um, at midnight on the Saturday prior to the Tuesday evaluation. Just be aware of that, and it gives her time to, if there's an error, if there's a sizing issue, if there's anything that is awry, it gives a little bit of time before the event so that no one is excluded. But remember, as early as you can submit, the better. And there is a hard line on that midnight on the Saturday prior to each Tuesday evaluation. Any questions about that? Sure. If you look at the Southern Exposure, which is the newsletter, it will give you an outline of what each meeting will entail. And as the big picture is, there are generally 5 evaluations per year and 5 didactic lectures, talks, whatever. And in each one of those, there's a whole arena of what you can and cannot do. The evaluations are always done by a professional. You submit your image. There are lots of rules and lots of things, hoops to jump through to make sure that the image is sized properly, named properly, etc. The groups are divided into 3 different groups as novice, advanced, and expert. So you're competing against like kind there. Um, but the evaluations are extremely valuable as the end of the year contest, if you want to call it that. So if you submit an image and the evaluator said, you know, this is too dark, too light, too this, too crooked, you can make some changes and then submit that for the end of the year judging. The end of the year judging is sort of a big deal in this group. And the banquet that comes is a nice event, social and award wise. So that's the big picture. The lead up is all of the evaluations uh, and the talks lead up pretty much to the banquet. The Q&A. The assigned subjects for this year, and it's listed in the newsletter: moody photography, lights in the night, and intentional camera movement. There is a talk on intentional camera movement on the month prior to this assigned subject, so that you can sort of know what to expect there. Um, The VCU health exhibit has ended, right? And and Montpelier we hung the other day, and is a nice display of, I don't know, 30 or so um, images. So if you want to take a nice road trip and it's a nice ride out there, it's a beautiful setting, and some nice images are hung out there. Absolutely.
For places that I should contact for exhibits coming up. The club has done exhibits multiple times at certain places, but I'm sure that there are other places that we might want to consider. So contact me at the exhibits email address that's in Southern Exposure. Thanks.
The exhibit phenomenon is a nice thing to show off our work. And if you have a suggestion about a place that would make a nice exhibit that we're not doing, then please step up. And we encourage people to exhibit their stuff. It's not just a digital thing, and it's a nice venue to, most of them are nice venues, and you might actually sell something. Good. Aaron.
All right. And to follow up on what Martin just said, someone just sold something. I heard from VCU, I believe. Is Patricia still here? Three people sold something out of the VCU exhibit.
VCU.
Yeah. So that's a really nice space there, and there's a lot of room, and we're able to put up a lot of pictures. So that's awesome.
Because it's the entrance.
It's the entrance.
Was that why you didn't have my photo, Patricia?
Congratulations to those three people. I'll find out who they are, and I'll put it in the magazine.
Got my picture, and he said it was, sorry, Parks, Roundtree, Pat Hutchinson, and Susan Reed, I believe.
Okay, super. Congratulations to the three of them. That's cool. All right. And as Martin mentioned, I'm Karen Davis. I am the communications and and publications director. So Southern Exposure is my baby that comes out on the first of each month for all of you new people. I also seem to be wearing the treasurer hat tonight. So if you happen to have a check and would like to pay your dues for next year, you can give those to me. But I do have the honor to introduce our speaker, because that's the arm I twisted to get her to come and talk to us tonight. I'll tell you a little bit of a background. I happened to be standing in the back sometime, I guess it was a year ago, a little over a year ago. Yeah, and this new face walked in the door, and I looked at her and said, "Oh, are you new?" And she said, "Yeah," and we struck up a conversation. And turns out that she was at the Valentine, and I went, "Oh, that's really cool." And she knew that she had done her research at the Valentine, knowing that they had a lot of the photography, and found this thing called the Camera Club of Richmond, and said, "Gee, I wonder if that's still in existence." So she Googled us, found our website. Thank you very much to our webmaster. Found our website and showed up. And I'm like, that's really cool. So we had a connection there with China, because as you can see up here, she was in Beijing for a while. And my two daughters are adopted from China, so we had to swap some China stories on that. But yeah, Keary has been an educator at the Valentine since 2021. You see, she's got her master's in public education and a bachelor's from University of North Carolina. Her two young men are about the same ages as my two young ladies, so we had that in common as well. But she has done several exhibits. She had a solo exhibit in Beijing while she was still there, and she's exhibited at the Jewish Community Center. And she does a lot of this kind of thing for the Valentine, and so I'm going to turn it over to her. She has a really great presentation to show us and tell us. So, Keary, take it away.
Thank you. It's always so weird to see yourself up like that. All right, so first things first. Let's see, you've got that, and you can hear me and everything okay, and I've got the little clicker. So has anyone been to the Valentine Museum? Oh, good. Nice number of hands. Does anybody know how we came into existence? So the short answer is Man Valentine was the person. He purchased this historic home downtown. It was built in 1812. And on his death, he decided that Richmond needed its own Smithsonian. And if it was going to be a world-class city, it had to have that. He was the guy to do it. He had collected Native American artifacts and had them. So the collection, the house, his brother Edward ran it for the first 30 years. And he left one $50,000 endowment, which in today's money is about $1.5 million, probably a bit more since I last checked it. And he got that money from meat juice. And you can see here, meat juice, the pointer doesn't work on the TV screen. So here's meat juice. His wife was sickly. He took big hunks of meat, put it in a press. I've seen photos of these presses. It looks like something out of a cartoon with the corkscrew up the top and the funnel on the front. Pressed the juice out of the meat, added egg whites and a recipe that, as I understand it, to this day is locked in a vault accessible only by Valentine family members. Simmered it, didn't boil it, and gave it to his wife. And he could be a happy guy no matter what, because he could be happy that his wife lived 3 more years, or if that wasn't enough, he made a fortune off of it. He took it to the Paris World's Fair. We have letters in the archives singing its praises as a miracle cure. It was produced until the 1970s and sold into the 1980s. And there was actually a bar in town that would add it to their Bloody Mary mixes. So we are the museum built on meat juice, which is always a lot of fun to start out with, because there's not many museums who can say that. So here you can see the house, the back of the house. Man Valentine and Edward. I think the guy sitting there and the one with the mustache over here, one of those is Man Valentine. I don't remember which. I always forget. And you can see in the inside of the house. Let's see. Yeah. I made a dingy noise. Did I do the wrong direction? So we do a lot of programs. This morning I was with actually the same program that he's doing here, because we just made those hats this morning with pre-kindergarten at an elementary school is what I was doing this morning. So we do a lot of programs. We do a lot of adult program. And so these talks, and there's a whole series of them, mostly we go to retirement homes, but also organizations like this or women's clubs, different groups. And we take a theme, and the museum has set these up, taking a theme and weaving the history of that theme with the history of Richmond. So other examples are on fashion or on the department stores, Tallheimers and Miller and Rhodes, or civil rights, segregation, women's suffrage. There's different themes. And so, because really living in Richmond here, we live in a city that if it happened and was important in the U.S. history, it probably had some leg of it was here in Richmond. And so this one, as you've seen, is called Developing Richmond. And so we're going to look at some of the photos that we have in our archive, which is quite expansive. And we'll look at how the development of photography changed a bit how we view the world, how we relate to the world around us, and how we tell stories. We talk about at the Valentine that we tell Richmond stories. And so, how does photography help tell this Richmond story? So we have 50 or 60 collections altogether. And in that, somewhere around 1 million photographs. We have everything, glass plates, daguerreotypes, all the way up through Style Weekly magazine's photo archives. So different things have been donated through the years. So we have a lot of photos to draw from, to talk about. We have actually, of the daguerreotypes, ambrotypes, tintypes, and albumen prints. We have over 540 of just those types of prints alone. So this is a photography club, and I'm going to preface this with, I have my script that comes from the museum, and I have research and what I've learned, but I know who my audience is. So if you have something to share that adds to it, that always makes the thing better. So if I'm saying something and you're like, yeah, I don't know, I've heard it's this other way, I'm happy to go there and take a moment for that. Because first of all, it makes it more interesting. You guys don't need to just hear my voice the whole time. Sometimes it's nice to have a little back and forth, but also because it makes us at the Valentine better, and we're always happy to do that. So if you talk about the initial photography, the very first photo in existence was from 1826, and it was a Frenchman, Joseph, I'd never looked up how to say his name properly, Neipce, and he took a camera obscura, put a plate of pewter in it with silver that was light reactive, and sat it there for 8 hours, and then pulled it out, used a solution to wash out the part not affected by the light, and then had his photo. You have to like shine a light at it to be able to see it. But that is the first known photo, and there are photos of that photo online, so you can see that. Now, he also worked with another man that's a name a little more familiar. He worked with Louis Daguerre. And so that's a name we know more. So Joseph actually passed away, and Daguerre kept going and adding to this. And so on August 19th, 1839, at the French Academy of Sciences of Paris, photography was announced. So this is considered, even though 1826, you have that early photo, there wasn't like this grand pronouncement of photography being a thing at that point. And so he used the silver solution on copper, and it produced a latent image that you couldn't see, and then you would put mercury fumes to get that image to show. And it was easier and better than the first one, but still time consuming. It didn't take 8 hours. It shortened the developing time, but it's still, I mean, you're dealing with mercury. Let's just start there, right? Okay. So after that, William Henry Fox Talbot came up with the calotype. And then you have a negative, and you can go on paper. And so you start changing how it can be transported. You start changing how it can be used, who can do it. And the daguerreotypes stayed more popular. The calotypes could go on paper, but they didn't have as much detail. They hadn't figured out how to get that detail transferred onto this other system. So
you could repeat the question.
So the question was, how are the older ones stored? So the museum actually just redid its archive space, and so they have, I know the glass plates, I believe, are in cases with like foam, and they're in there. Now, we're trying to get, one of the things we hope to do with this collections talk at the museum, because I'm not in collections, they won't let me touch the stuff. Okay, this is curators are going to do this, but we're going to try to get some of these things pulled out of the archives, and then there'll be a curator to ask who knows everything far better than I do. Yes. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Some of these, like the glass. Yeah, the glass plates, like it can just slide right off what's on there. So you really have to know what you're doing. And I don't know what they will deem, because I haven't gotten far enough in arranging this to know what they will deem okay to pull out from the collection. But I've gone to things as a visitor, not as an employee, and it was, clothing from 1814. So they are not afraid to pull out things in special conditions and have it looked at.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Would you say, you said August 19th, 1839, right?
Yes.
Would you say that's the birthday of photography?
So it's interesting because actually the way
That's my birthday, so I'm just really asking from a selfish. I just want to know if I coincide with that, if I was my destiny.
1839, you're looking good.
Not a literal birthday, but
So if you look around online, half of the websites will give that date as the birth of photography.
I'll take it.
The sort of purists, like somebody who has a art history major from the Valentine, is like, no, it went back further. So this other one wasn't even rediscovered, I think, until the 1950s or something. And so, yes, that formal announcement, the birth of photography, is that 1839 date. So let's see here if I can hit the right button. All right. So earliest known photo of Richmond. It's a daguerreotype from 1855. It is looking from Church Hill over towards the city of Richmond. And I'm going to use the pointer for a different way. Any guesses what that is right there? That is the Capitol. When we do programs with kids, and I'm going to tell you guys the same thing because, you know, it all runs together here. As we go through photos, look and see if we have other photos of Richmond, look for that building. Now, I would get confused because I'm like, well, what direction is this? From Church Hill, it should be that there were wings added to it after most of these photos were done. I can't remember the year that the wings were added to the Capitol building, but originally it was just a rectangular building. And because of the way the city was with buildings, and actually Richmond was pretty deforested by 1790, there's not a lot in the way between any views and the Capitol building. So when I do this with kids, I ask what they think about this, and they think it's a photo from after the Civil War. Well, 1855 is not after the Civil War, it's before. And if you look here, there's parts here, thank you, because for those on Zoom, because they can't see, that are really very clear. It's believed that what happened is, because this is a daguerreotype, it is the silver over top of the copper, that somebody went, it looks a little dirty, let me wipe it off, and damage the photo. So, and you can kind of see wipe marks there on it through the middle, but that is the oldest known photo of Richmond. Let's see here. So if you think about it, this etching is from about the same time period. It's a roughly the same view. Okay, it's an etching. This was everybody's view of the world. If you weren't in a particular place, how you saw the world was like this. So if you think about the comparison, let's see. Yeah. If you think about the comparison of really understanding what a place looks like, I'm going to mess with you here with this back, or I can just tell you forward and back either way. Like, photography really did change how people view the world and people's understanding of the world and what it looked like. And if you think of it from an accuracy standpoint, well, which one's more accurate? Minus the scrub marks, okay? The photo is clearly more accurate. Now here we have Broad Street in it's 107 block of the 100 block of Broad Street. We don't have the exact location, the exact number, and it is from around 1860. A lot of our photos in the collection are street scenes like this, that you can see what the city looked like. So here we have F. McCarthy, if you see on the left there. Pizzini is in the middle, and he was known as the Napoleon of confectioners. He immigrated from Italy in 1840 and opened the shop, sold decorated cakes, raisins, currants, and almonds. So bringing exotic foods to Richmond in the 1860s. And again, if you think about what people had available to them, so to get this photo of this gentleman. This is a glass plate. Now, when you're talking about glass plates, there's actually two types. There's collodion wet plate and silver gelatin dry plate. And the wet plates used, as we said, they had to be dipped. So let me get this, make sure. So you put the light reactive material on the glass plate. You had to take the photo before the plate dried for the wet plate. The other issue with it is the collodion mixture was flammable. So it's making our digital camera sound so nice, isn't it? Even having to go into a dark room. And so it created limitations on what you could do, because every time you went to go take a photo, you had to prepare your plate and you had to take the photo before it dried. So getting the silver gelatin dry plate, which was invented by Dr. Richard L. Maddox in 1870s, it then meant that photography, you could prepare the plates in advance and you could carry them where you were going instead of having to carry glass plates and all the liquids and with you. Now you're still trying to go out taking photos carrying a bunch of glass with you. So it's still heavy, it's still not easy. And so, you know, being this fragile, and as we saw in that other photo, easily scratched, it's still not easy, but it is getting better. And then again, I was saying, you know, digital, this is Google Street View, roughly the same area, same block in Richmond. And so we can see how it's changed, but also just how much easier and how much more accessible photography is. So this one we have St. Peter's Catholic Church. It was the first Catholic church in Richmond. It was built in 1834 near Grace, near the Capitol. And the early congregants were immigrants who came, mostly Irish immigrants who came to work on the river and on the canal system. And so then this was the start of having the Catholic Church here. This is also a glass negative for this photo. And I can show you then, this is what it looks like today. So again, getting our bearings here. Well, this is zoomed in the way the slide goes, so you can't quite see the area around it so well, but it is still here, clearly. So now we come up to the Civil War, and having this, multiple things at play here. So with the Civil War, we have the first war that's documented on photography. We also then, conversely, have the need to being able to carry photographic equipment around more easily. And so it pushed for more development of how photography, for how photography worked, for the technical side of it. And so to be able to create negatives, to be able to print on paper, all of these things were important during that time period. This photo here on the, let me make sure, left is rockets landing at the James River in 1865. Looks a little different than today. And actually, if you go on the river very much, so much of the river has the old pylons from piers. You can see that it was very much looking much busier, even not in war, than this natural area that we have now. The right is the Lee camp, what's now the VMFA. One of these here, I think that one is the Robinson House. And then stretched back here is where the other, the building now is that was the home for widows and children of Confederate soldiers. So you're getting this chance now that you can more easily transfer photos to paper, and you have to fix it some way that it doesn't it doesn't fall apart, it doesn't fade away. And so they used egg white, albumin. I always have to look it up, and then I always forget how to say it. Albumin. Thank you. I keep, every time I do it, like, wait, did I do that right? So it's egg white. Now, the interesting thing about doing this egg white process, when you first develop the pictures, they have a blue cast to them, bluish purple cast. And as time goes by, the photos yellow over time. So when you see these old photos that have very heavily yellow cast to them, that was often because it's used this egg white mix, and it's been exposed to the light too often. And so let's see. So also during this time, we start getting the tintypes. We know there was a Confederate soldier because of the clothing. The person is William Russell Robinson. This is around 1860. So if you notice, it's in a case here. So there's two reasons for that. One is, while it's getting more stable and it's on paper, it's still pretty fragile. The other thing is that these cases became keepsakes. So somebody's going off to war, you have this to remember them by. And on the flip side, the soldiers would often have these with, say, lockets of hair tucked in them, other mementos. So it was a way to have both the photo and a memento of the person together. And so this was these fancy cases in it. So it became much more, not just the photo, but beyond that. And so here we have some other photos, other portraits here. So this time period, we have, let me make sure, yes, I'm in the right spot. So this time period, we as the photos are getting more prevalent, they're on paper, they can be mailed to people, again, keepsakes before going off to war, and they actually became calling cards. And so they were called carte de visite. Depends on where you look up the visite, whether you say it very French or not. And so you could get multiple copies. The guy could have a lady in every port, whatever. But anyhow, you'd have multiple copies. They were small in size, relatively inexpensive. And now I need glasses for the quote, because in 1863, Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote, "Card portraits, as everybody knows, have become the social currency, the greenbacks of civilization." So they became very, very popular as calling cards, and people would have them, and kind of like, well, we sort of moved past business cards a little bit with cell phones, but it was the business cards of the day, or the social calling cards you think about, like in Little Women or things where they go from house to house. Yes.
Relatively expensive for the time?
They were inexpensive enough to be accessible. So they weren't necessarily like, you want to look after it, you put it in the case, you do things, but it was still, when you're talking about it, if you think about the socioeconomic class that would have calling cards, you're still at that strata of society. It's not necessarily something that those in lower strata of society would be able to afford, and they didn't socialize the same way. So here we have a photo of Richmond, and this was the Spotswood Hotel. It was at 9th and Main. It opened in 1861, and lots of Confederate generals and majors stayed there. It had a reputation in the paper for having lots of fights and accidents occur there. So, and this photo, while you would think that this is after the Civil War, it is, the time period is, this is 1870, but 1870 in Richmond was called the Year of Disasters. And so you had this This hotel burned down in 1870. The Capitol building at one point had the courts building inside the Capitol, and the floor collapsed on the courts building, the room where the courts were held, and the people fell to the floor below. If you go in to visit the Capitol now, it's up on the second floor. The courts building were up on the third. And there's a plaque noting how many people, can't remember how many people died and whatnot, but there is a plaque there. So the courts building fell. Oh, sorry, 62 killed. I forgot I had that here. 251 injured. In April, there was the Great Virginia Flood, where it was 24 feet, 9 inches above flood stage. That was in October. There were fires. There was drought in addition to flooding in 1870, and the death of Robert E. Lee. And I think one of the more interesting things, the mayor got into a fight and 5 people were killed. So all of those things happened in 1870. It is actually said that there were caskets were floating in this flood, and Lee died. And the rumor is that the casket he was buried in was plucked out of a tree because the casket maker's space had flooded and the casket was up in the tree. So I don't know the veracity of that story, but that is a rumor of the time. So then we get into stereography, and this is the first time with 3D images. This is the precursor to the Viewmaster and those. And so again, Oliver Wendell Holmes here, he invented an affordable stereo viewer, and he wrote in the Atlantic Monthly of June 1859 that the first effect of looking at a good photograph through the stereoscope is a surprise such as no painting ever produced. The mind feels its way into the very depths of the picture. The scraggy branches of a tree in the foreground run out at us as if they would scratch our eyes out. The elbow of a figure stands forth so as to make us almost uncomfortable. And again, so this is another shift. If we think about, this isn't that long. This is 1859. We're only talking really, 1839 that photography is announced, that people are getting this view of the world, of the world as it is. And now you add in that on top of that, you can get these 3D images that creating these stereographs was created. So this is something else. In the Valentine collection, there are scenes from Paris, Cairo, Germany, and Richmond images also went out around the world as well. So I like these. These are fun. So here we have 2 Valentine brothers. There were more besides Man Valentine and Edward. On the left is William Winston Valentine, and then we have Man Valentine II here. And this collection is actually at the VMHC. We don't have it. It's 1853 daguerreotypes. A British artist named William Hubbard came to Richmond. He was doing bronze copies of the marble statue of George Washington. And so he formed like this artist group. It became in vogue amongst this was people of means, to start exploring photography as art, to start thinking of it as what you can do with this. And if you think about it, at this point, you had to hold the exposure for a long time. So they had to hold those faces for 5 minutes, I think it was. Now, in this time period, what you would find sometimes in photos, you'll actually see they would create a headrest because it was so hard to sit still enough that there would be a headrest behind the person to help them hold it. Any guesses what emotions we have here? Anger, yeah. So yeah, I hear frustration. So hatred and scorn is what man said, and Williams was despair. Although that's backwards because it's they're the other way around on here. But anyhow, hatred and scorn and despair. Yeah, no, you would think about for the time period and the lack of dentistry. So this is a person here. This is Cook, George Cook on the left, and Eustace. Sorry, yeah, and then Eustace Cook, and their father and son. Yeah, George is on the left, Eustace is on the right. George Cook was born in New Orleans and was in South Carolina during the Civil War. Took a lot of photography of Fort Sumter and Charleston. And then after the Civil War, came to Richmond and set up his photography studio here. He started as an artist and switched to portrait photography all the way back when he was in New Orleans and became an instructor for others. And he did a lot of the old photography. There's at least 10,000 photos from the Cook collection in the Valentine Museum. One of the things that happened, though, they were a very successful studio. So as other studios went out of business, they would buy the glass plates from the other studio as it went out of business and keep it. George ran the business for a while, then Eustace joined him. And when Eustace passed away, I believe it was 1957 even, his wife donated the collection to the Valentine Museum. So we have at the museum, if you don't come with the Camera Club, or if you do, you'll see it. But if you get down to the Valentine, downstairs we have a whole gallery that is lined around with photos from the Cook studio. There's one of men riding the penny farthing bikes, the ones with the large wheel in front of the governor's mansion. That's one of my favorites. So, of course, I'm getting choked up here. I don't know where that came from. So this is a church picnic in Bon Air around, oh, wow, this is good. I saw Karen get up, so maybe she's getting some water. And now I can't see my dates on my notes. Like my eyes were watering for. Oh goodness! You guys are more polite than kids would be at this. So. All right, now I'm good. Now if I can just get my eyes to quit watering. So this is a church picnic around 1885. And the Cook, this is a very candid photo. And if you think about photos that we generally see of African Americans from this time period, do they look like this? No, very much the images that we see of African Americans in Richmond, they are very much speaking to a particular idea of what it's thought they should look like or are supposed to look like. And actually, Eustace took this photo and in later times quit taking casual photos and ended up taking photos of African Americans that matched the stereotypes. Another plug for the museum. We have an oil painting collection up right now from an artist from 1930s that are portraits of African Americans that are just portraits of people. Like there's not all of the stereotypes and the caricatures that were developed during the time of the late 1800s and on beyond, and they're just stunning portraits. And it's really nice to see an artist just paint people. And the opening, they tried to. The curator said she kept trying to add meaning to it and put thought behind it. And the guy's great nephew is who has loaned the paintings. And he's like, no, he would not want anything. He just painted what he saw. So those are other stunning. They're right next to the Cook collection pictures. So this is 1888. It's an upper middle class family. Now, in 1884, Eastman Camera introduced the flexible celluloid film, the roll. And 4 years later, there was a portable box camera with the where the exposure time again was shortened. And the advertising was, you press the button, we do the rest, because you sent the box in, you paid $10, and they would send the film back. Now, $10 in the 1880s, again, it's not something everybody can afford, but it is something some people can afford. And so you have a shift again in what photography looks like as a whole, because it's not just the formal portraits, it's not just the scene, you know, war scenes or formal things. You start getting collections of people. You start getting, you know, you think you posed with your family at the holidays and get a photo of everyone. You start getting more of these types of photos. And if you look, there was something going on here, because that is not a normal, you know, these things are not outfits that look exactly normal for everyday wear. So, well, yes. So Carey Street, before Carey Street was Carey Street. Well, I guess it was already Carey Street, but so clearly there's something going on here. We don't know what it is. It's lost to time, but a costume party, something is happening here, because everybody is dressed uniquely. So now we have a photo. The other thing, as you're getting photos, so then we can start looking at industry and how industry is changing and developing. Now, if you were listening earlier, you'd be able to tell me what type of photo this is, how it was processed, what it was processed with. Albumin, yes, because it's this purpley blue color. So this photo has not been exposed to light very much in the since the mid 1880s, and so it still has that purpley blue color. So these are rolling machines for rolling cigarettes. It was invented by a man named Bonsack, and then the machines were named after him. And if you notice, it's all mostly women there, because women were hired for light industrial work because they had nimble fingers. So also children would be hired. There's also just the little issue that they could pay women and children a lot less too. So you can see this is all women here. We have other photos from this time period, and the men, you know, the white men are in the suits on the side, and everybody else is in the middle doing these chores. This is Tredegar. This photo is, I don't have a year on this photo, actually. So it was a primary iron producer. It was, Tredegar produced 50% of the cannons that the Confederacy used in the Civil War. So very much an important industry and space for Richmond. I don't know if any of you, has anybody seen this photo before? So we know where we are. Where are we here? Yeah, Monument Avenue with the Lee statue. So there was not really tobacco fields growing at Monument Avenue. This photo is from 1919, but there was a field here, and there was an assignment to set up a photo that was very Richmond, that had all of the Richmond elements in it. And so the tobacco was put there, and the Lee statue. And so this is a marketing photo for Richmond. It did become part of an advertising campaign. So this is, at this time period in the early 1900s, this is what we wanted people to think of Richmond. That's all right. This sounds, yeah, they still surprise me because they're scattered through. Has anybody been down to Triple Crossing? Yeah, I actually finally, I was down there not long ago. I was taking a walk because it was part of the museum that's down there. I was taking a walk on my lunch break, and one of the canal boats was going by, and I finally figured out where the third track was, because I'd always seen the top two, but I'd never figured out where the third one was. And he was pointing it out to the folks on the canal boat. And if he's right, then now I know. This photo was taken in 1911, and on clear days, so nobody got delayed, Thursdays at 12:01, all three trains would be on the all three tracks would be used on the triple crossing. And so this is the Southern, the Seaboard and the Chesapeake and the Ohio tracks. And so Thursdays at 12:01, you had to get your camera out there to go take your photo. It is hard to find today with 95 and all that stuff down there. And again, if we're talking about industry, you know, this was the railroads, very important to Richmond's development. All right, so we have, you know, again, with Eastman developing the cheaper film, the roll film, you could get more photos like this. This is 1900 Carnival Floral Parade. There was a week-long festival in Richmond to celebrate the turning to the beginning of the 20th century. There were parades, concession booths on Broad. They built a big arch over Broad to commemorate it. And so here we can see some of what was done, the parade float in Richmond in 1900. This is a photo of Armstrong High School. I don't have a date on this photo. Armstrong High School opened in 1870 as the Richmond Colored Normal School. It was funded by the Freedmen's Bureau. Richmond did not have any public schools until 1870. Prior to that, all education was private, either a private tutor at home or a private school that was founded. So the whole idea of having public schools was not until 1870. And so this is a typing club from the early 1900s. In 1909, it was named after General Samuel Chapman Armstrong, who led the U.S. colored troops. So that's why we have Armstrong High School. It was named after this general. And you can just see here some of the details. Some of these things, like, you know, I'm old enough for chalkboards, but most kids today wouldn't know them, you know, because everything's whiteboards and TVs and those things. And you can see the typewriters and just some of the details here. And a lot of things have changed, and an awful lot of things are still the same as you would find in a high school today. Guesses where this is? What location? Yes, this is the Capitol building. This is a women's suffrage rally from 1920. So Lila Meade Valentine and Ellen Glasgow, these two women were some of several women suffragists in Richmond. Between them, they've organized the Virginia League for Women's Suffrage and the Richmond Equal Suffrage League. Now, you notice there was a name Valentine there. Lila Meade Valentine. She was the daughter-in-law of Man Valentine. Let's just say I doubt they discussed women's suffrage over Sunday dinner or Thanksgiving. The gentlemen, the older men in the family, were not in favor of women's suffrage at all, and she's off founding women's suffrage organizations. Luckily, her husband supported her, so at least in their own home, things were okay, and they could talk over dinner. So. And this is what I'm talking about as we go through here. Like, all of these are like big things: industrialization, women's suffrage, prohibition. These are all like American stories and American history, the Civil War. And so we, you know, Richmond really does touch all of these things, some more than others, as being the capital of the Confederacy. And so they had to raid. If you read up there at the top, it says packed between boxes of tomatoes. So they were smuggling the liquor in the tomato delivery. Newspapers in Richmond initially supported prohibition. I think we do forget just how much people drank in the past. Water wasn't potable, as we just had last week. John Wickham, that Wickham house that the museum is in, I one time figured out how much he had an inventory done. There was a probate inventory done when he died, and I can't remember how many tens of thousands of dollars in today's money of Madeira wine, other wines, port, just the alcohol was tens of thousands of dollars in today's money. So initially there was support for prohibition, and then it's like, this isn't working. And so we get to the 21st Amendment, which then introduces that you can do light beer and a low alcohol wine, and it's not till later that we get back to the other stuff.
1/3 of American men.
You know, a
third of the men were. That was the whole reason why prohibition got put in.
I have to say, the longer I work this job, when people say they wish they could go back in time, I haven't found a time I want to go back to yet. From chamber pots to no air conditioning to not having potable water and you're drinking alcohol instead. I haven't found one yet. All right, so this photo here is Broad Street from the 1930s. And you can see written on the sides, it's just handwritten in there, Tallheimers and Miller and Rhodes, and then Liggett's Drug. And so Broad Street, if you think about the South, this is 1930s. Richmond, you can see the streetcar lines here. Richmond was the first city to have electric streetcars. And so, and then actually, because of the electric streetcars, the electricity was put in by the streetcar companies, who then are like, oh, we have these electric lines running through town. We should be able to do something else with it. And it was the streetcar companies who started selling electricity to like Tallheimers and Miller and Rhodes. So by the 1930s, they had air conditioning and they had electric escalators and things like that. And it spun off from the streetcar companies trying to maximize their profits. Forest Hill had an amusement park, and actually Coney Island and some others. Those all developed because they were at the end of the streetcar line. And so the owners wanted people to ride to the end of the line and pay as much as possible, so they would put amusements at the end. And so by having this with Broad Street, with Richmond being an early adopter for having streetcars and having this electricity, it drew people in from around the countryside because it was stuff they couldn't get elsewhere. So it created a sort of a magnet to the space here. And you can look back. So here we have the comparison. That's that photo we saw at the very beginning, also on Broad Street in the same general area there. So as we were getting here, by the 20s and 30s, families had their own cameras. This is a 1923 birthday party. I think we've all taken photos like that or been a part of photos like that. Some things haven't changed. And this, Karen, when you were asking about photos, I completely forgot about these two in this talk. This is where we start looping back. And yes, in all seriousness, it was working on this talk and giving this talk, which is why I'm standing here today. And so because you start having the ability to have a camera, it becomes more accessible and more affordable. You don't just have the Passion series by the Valentines with their faces. You start looking at doing photography as art. These are photos by Hankins that he did at that time period. He was friends with William Edwin Booth, and we all know why we're here today. I don't know the time period of starting the club in June of 1932. So anyhow, any thoughts on where these were taken? I don't have the exact locations, but does anything look, any thoughts on where those might have been taken? Yeah, it kind of has that look, doesn't it? So isn't Moody shots one of our assigned subjects? So here we have, back from the beginning of the Camera Club, some Moody shots. As you know, personal cameras get even more affordable. So by the 1940s, you have the Brownie camera that was sold for $1. It was popular with the military. And as we see this evolution of what kinds of photos we're getting, we're getting, not in addition to those posed family portraits, the self-portraits, the portraits of a family event, you just start getting personal photos of, I'm at this parade, watching the soldiers march in to go watch bring Berlin's This Is the Army. And so you start getting more of these kinds of just sort of street scenes. You get into wedding photography here. So this is from the, let me get the studio, Colonial Studio from 1950. We have expansion of Richmond after the war here. So all of these things start getting documented. Keary Street, or Keary Court as it was called, and the emergence of the car culture in the U.S. You also start getting photos of famous people. So we have Bill Robinson, Bill Bojangles Robinson, who danced with Shirley Temple. Jack Dabney was a local person who ran clubs, and then we have Jesse Owens here. And one interesting note about Bill Robinson, Jackson Ward over by Lee Street and what is now, I forget, if you turn right, it becomes Chamberlain. That corner, he put in the street lights there, the traffic lights there. Bill Robinson, he was from Richmond. The city wasn't going to put the street lights in because it's Jackson Ward. It was the African-American neighborhood. So they weren't going to bother putting in street lights there, but he paid for the street lights so that it was safer for the kids to cross the street to go to school and safer for them to play. We have other visitors to Richmond. These guys should look familiar here. And after World War II, Richmond had a pretty good boom in industry. And actually, we survived in the Depression pretty well for a long time because of tobacco and some of the industries they have. So we became a spot for campaign stops here. So we have Winston Churchill and General Eisenhower. Martin Luther King came to Richmond, Martin Luther King Jr., rather. This is Richmond Stadium in 1963. This is Gloria Jean Meade and Carol Irene Swan, who were the first students in Richmond to integrate a school. This is them in 1960 going into Chandler Junior High. So we know the famous photo of the little girl. This is the Richmond version of that moment. And we can document changes on Broad. Doesn't look like those early photos with the streetcars and the wagons. Willow Lawn, 6th Street downtown. So again, all these changes then can be documented here. We have the VMFA, and this is the 6th Street Marketplace, which came and went before I ever moved to Richmond. Downtown Broad Street, as Tallheimer's, Miller and Rhodes closed, they were trying to revitalize downtown. A lot of other cities did the same, and it did not succeed, needless to say, since we don't still have it here. Try to see if I have a year for that. And so now we have Broad Street today. and different photos, and the river. In 2012, Outside Magazine named Richmond as the best river city. So clearly all of us I know have been down by the river to take photos. I was just there after it snowed Saturday, so I'm sure others have done the same. And then we get into digital photos, photography, and Instagram, and all these other places. So again, the history evolves. And that's what I have for you today. So, any questions? I know sometimes I can talk fast, but any questions? Yeah. So, and the million photos, so a good chunk of those are digital. So we do have, we have Style Weekly magazine's collection. So there are some that are digital. We also just have a big collection. As I understand it, the collection counts as one item in the archive, not each individual photo, because our collection as a whole, our total archive is 1.6 million objects. And that's a lot of things that are a lot bigger than photos. So the museum just did a renovation of the space to expand the archive space to get in state-of-the-art storage facilities that you can fit more items in better, with better care. And the museum is going through a big deaccessioning thing. So like the stereographs of photos of Paris, that might go away potentially, because we want to focus on having things that tell Richmond stories. And so objects that don't do that. But that's a curator question for how they manage it, because I don't know how they manage it. No, they, so the mansion is exactly how it was. Sorry, I keep forgetting. So the question was how we stored everything. And I'm sorry, I forgot about that. At the museum, if we have a million photos. So the mansion is standalone, and then the row houses down the rest of the block, the facades are there, and downstairs is the museum exhibit space, and the top, second and third floors are office space and archive space. And then there's an addition out the back. Again, it's not huge. I mean, as I understand it, we have more items in our collection than the VMFA has in theirs. So our director was bragging about that recently. Oh, you only have 50,000 objects. So the goal is to get our collection down maybe to half. For a while, we were more of a Richmond collections museum. So if somebody died and had 122 porcelain dogs, they would donate it to the museum, and they did. And so porcelain dogs probably have new homes now. So items that don't match telling Richmond stories specifically, not just that somebody in Richmond owned it once, unless there's more to the story than it's being deaccessioned. Anything else? Yes.
Any other questions?
You doing us? Oh, yeah. All right. Are you doing a particular collection soliciting pictures from the pandemic?
Short answer is yes. I don't know that they're soliciting photos, but yes. I mean, the museum firmly believes that history did not stop in 1904 or whatever, whenever the time period. And so, for example, one of the basketball goals that was at the Lee Circle, the museum has one of those basketball goals. They were hoping to put it on display, but something else, they couldn't move it. Anyhow, so they are continuing. There was just a sign exhibit that is closed now, but it had signs from during the pandemic. So yes, the museum is not stopping and is continuing to acquire things, photos and other objects that represent what Richmond's still going through. So. All right, thank you all. You guys are a lot less fidgety than 4-year-olds, so.
Yeah, Thank you very much, Keary. That was awesome. And our club is making a donation on her behalf
Oh,
to
thank
thank the Valentine for sending her over here to do this for us. So just a couple of quick reminders. We are doing an evaluation next month. I saw a couple of questions on that. We'll be at the back of the room if you want a little bit more information if you're newer to the club. But we invite all of our members to submit up to 2 photos, and you can do digitals or you can do prints this month because we have Anthony's going to be here in person. He will evaluate 1 or 2 of your prints. And the rules, we're going to be getting the rules out pretty shortly. And then Pat Hutchinson and I, Pat's the digital director, we're going to do a little Q&A session on Zoom. So if you have questions, that'd be a great time. Oh, hello. That would be a great time to get those questions answered. And any of the board members, if the board members just sort of wave a little bit so we know who's on the board, yeah. So if you have questions, we've been around for a while and we can answer those questions. So any other club type questions? All right. Well, thank you. And thank you again, Keary. Let's have another round of applause.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Thank you.